everyone, and welcome to the Link Through Social podcast. My name is Paul Wright, and this is bonus episode number 26. In celebration of our 25 episodes of the Link Through Social podcast, we are presenting this bonus episode to you today, and it will be known as episode 26. And we're going to be welcoming Joe Effortlessly. And he's the founder of Claricast, which is a podcast production company that helps businesses launch and grow podcasts that support their business goals. And that will be coming up after this short break. But before we get into that, I just want to thank our two sponsors, Smart Post app, which can be found at smartpostapp.com, and TicketPortX, which can be found at TicketPortX.com. Thank you for your support, and I encourage our viewers and listeners to check out the services that both of these sponsors offer. So we'll get to Joe Effortlessly right after this short break.
You've worked hard to build your audience, so why send your customers somewhere else? Introducing white label digital storefronts from TicketPortX. Now you can process tickets, registrations, donations, merchandise sales, and collect valuable customer data directly on your website or custom landing page. Increase brand visibility, create a stronger connection with your customers, deliver a seamless user experience, and monetize your brand with high-converting pages powered by TicketPortX's secure hosting, payment processing, and event technology. Perfect for festivals, conventions, classes, retail storefronts, charity events, sporting events, and even free events. But that's not all. Introducing TicketPortX multi-day events. Hosting a festival, seminar, conference, tournament, or event series. No more manually sending tickets 24 hours later. No more scrambling to issue comps and catch up with attendees. With TicketPortX, everything happens in real time. Sell tickets for multiple events on one page. Create ticket packages across different dates. Manage entire event series from a single storefront, and spend less money marketing multiple links and event pages. One platform, one link, endless possibilities. TicketPortX, powering your brand, your events, and your growth.
And welcome back to the Link Through Social podcast. Well, we have a really good guest for us today, Joe Effortlessly, and he's from Claricast Pod. That's claricast.com/podcasting-amplified on his URL. And Joe is the founder of Claricast, a podcast production company that helps businesses launch and grow podcasts that support their business goals. He specializes in helping founders and marketers use podcasting to build authority, reach decision makers, and support business growth. He's also the host of Podcasting Amplified, which is a podcast that's built a huge following on YouTube with over 13,000 subscribers by sharing practical podcasting advice. 13,000 subscribers. I'm jealous, Joe. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Paul. Really nice intro there. Nice and concise. And yeah, hit the nail on the head. Yeah, I appreciate that with the subscriber base there. It's been something that I've been growing over quite a long time, even before Claricast. So yeah,
that's wonderful.
Still growing, but yeah, thank you.
Nice. So before we get into Claricast and talking about a few different subjects, why don't you just give me a little bit more about your background?
Yeah, so I started my career in music primarily. I took music technology, music production in university. I just loved working with audio gear, audio equipment, recording and mixing and everything. Worked in a few studios around the UK, recording bands, and then that kind of expanded into other areas like advertising and podcasting, so recording and editing podcasts. And then that kind of went back down into a niche into podcasting. So now we just do podcast production. And then as the podcasting industry has grown to beyond just audio, so my skills have had to grow with it, and I've had to hire people to do, the show notes writing, video, production, promotion, all sorts of the other aspects that are now integral to podcasting.
Wonderful. So I have to ask you, what are the three pillars every successful podcast needs to grow their audience?
Yeah, so I call them the three C's, just to make it nice and easy to remember.
Okay.
So the content is the first one, then the consistency, and then connection. So content, this is, I feel like it may be self-explanatory or maybe obvious that you need to make sure the content is good. But I feel like a lot of podcasters, especially for podcasts that have been developed to grow a business, they tend to skip some of these aspects, and partly because they want to kind of get into the conversion side of things as quickly as possible, but also maybe because there's some unawareness of what a great podcast looks and sounds like in
Yes.
2026 when we're recording this. So it's about really understanding who your ideal listener is first. So who is it that you're looking to attract in terms of who would be the perfect listener, who would share your show, who would get the most value out of it, and who would in turn help to grow your business, if that indeed is the end goal. And then making sure you're tailoring your content directly to them. And then just really making sure that your audio visual quality is as good as possible, that it's nicely edited, that whoever's editing it understands who that ideal listener is. So the content that they're left with is all stuff that they're going to be able to get value from. And then once we've got that content quality down, that's when we want to make sure that we stay consistent with it. Again, this is something that a lot of podcasters struggle with. When they first start podcasting, they maybe don't realize quite how much work is involved. I'm sure, anyone who's had a podcast, yourself, Paul, as well,
I can attest
even
to
me, yeah,
Yeah.
where you can get everything in place, but when you realize that, especially if it's a weekly podcast, just getting the guests in and dealing with no shows and putting all the content together and promoting it and everything, it's hard to stay consistent. But I think consistency, podcasting is the one medium where it's really important, because people will have you in their feed. They want to know when to expect you. They want you to be that kind of voice in their ear every Tuesday or every other Thursday or whenever it is.
Yes.
So just making sure that you're showing up for your audience. And then the third one, as I mentioned, is connection. Once we've got those things in place, I would say that is when to start focusing on actually getting it in front of more people. So connecting with people and marketing your podcast, which we can go into more detail in terms of methods in that space. But yeah, the connection piece, getting it in front of more people, making connections with new listeners, with your existing listeners, and so on.
So content, consistency, connection. I love it. The three pillars of a successful podcast. Now, of course, the emergence of AI, we talk about it every week here on the show. What role should AI play in podcasting?
Yeah. So I recently put an episode out called What ChatGPT Won't Tell You About Podcasting, because there are definitely things that I think podcasters are relying on AI with now. It's kind of lulling people into a false sense of security almost, in that, and this isn't just the podcasting, I think it's in a lot of contexts, and it can be incredibly useful. Don't get me wrong. And we can touch on like ways that AI can be useful, but I think people need to be careful, especially when they're just starting out, what they're using ChatGPT for versus something that they'd be better off speaking to a human being for. Like, I did a few tests recently for this episode where I was asking it some common podcasting questions that people might need to ask when they're launching a podcast. And one of them is, can you come up with a podcast name for a new podcast? This is who I want listening to it. This is what it's about. Give me 10 name ideas. Now, this is a really common way to use AI to put a podcast together. Mm-hmm. But one thing that we always make sure of when we're starting podcasts for clients is that the name is unique. So it's not in use elsewhere, because there can be legal issues, or it can just make it more difficult for you to be discovered if you want people to search for yours and someone else is coming up. But something like 30% of the podcast names that came up when I did this search, even though ChatGPT said, these are these are not in use. I did a quick search and they were in use. So,
Hmm.
and a lot of people might think that's obvious. Like, you'd have to do a search yourself. You'd look on trademark websites and things like that. But
Right.
I think there is definitely some false sense of security there where some people are trusting it maybe a little bit too much. And then just a couple of other little things I tried, like, what's the best microphone for podcasting? And as an audio guy, I kind of cringed at some of the results there
Oh,
because a lot of them are kind of using, I mean, I don't know what the percentage is. It was something like 30 to 50% at one point that I read that of ChatGPT's data that comes from Reddit. And, not everyone on Reddit knows what they're talking about,
no,
obviously.
they don't.
Um, but yeah, I mean, those are just some things that I feel we need to be a little bit careful of.
Yeah.
But the question was, where does it sit? And I think there are really valuable ways that you can use AI to, especially with that consistency piece. I wouldn't say just going back to the three C's, I wouldn't say in terms of the content, it's that helpful at the moment. There are
No.
plenty of AI read podcasts and AI written podcasts that just don't do very well because you need that connection there. You need a human on the other end of it. But for writing things like show notes or blog posts alongside your podcast, it can be great to, if you train a LLM to write in the way that you write, then it can be great for that. Again, as long as you go through it and make sure that it all makes sense and that it is following the ideal guidelines for writing show notes. Because some of these tools, again, that I've seen, they say they write show notes, but it would just be kind of a really boring
Yeah.
kind of summary that aren't very enticing at all. In terms of editing, there are editing tools out now that will help things. Like I use something called Autopod, which it doesn't edit your podcast for you, but if you're doing multicam video editing, it will basically do the switching between the cameras for you. And
Nice.
obviously you need to go through the whole thing yourself, but it saves maybe 15 minutes or so off the edit. And yeah, I mean, there are various other tools that have AI under the belt. This is less kind of large language model, generative AI like we talk about in 2026. This is more
Yes.
just artificial intelligence that's been around for decades. But systems like Podmatch, which which is a great option for finding ideal guests or ideal
Oh, yes.
podcasts for you to guess on, obviously, which we use to set this interview
Yes.
up.
Yeah.
And it uses AI under the hood to match people based on keywords and things. So I think, to sum up, there are definitely ways that it can be valuable, but we've just got to make sure that we keep the human in there and make sure that we're not relying on it too heavily for
Yes.
certain things.
It is. It's very important to keep the human element, because it does make mistakes and it does misinterpret. And some of the sources, like you mentioned, Reddit or some of the reviews of a particular thing that you're searching, it's not always accurate 100%. So you always should be checking and it's a good tool. It's a good
Mhm.
tool to save some time on certain aspects. But yes, 100%, you must keep the human element uh, in your podcast. Now, businesses are using a podcast to, you know, potentially promote their services or their products. Um, how can a business use a podcast to open the door to the key decision makers that, potentially might use their services or products?
Yeah, so I like to split this into two camps. So there's leveraging the listeners to grow your business, and there's leveraging the guests, which is one that I think a lot of businesses haven't thought of. The first thing they'll think about is, right, we're going to start a podcast. Let's say it's for a recruitment company, they recruit in the housing industry. So they'll start a podcast uh, on the housing industry, and then they're looking to attract people, C-suite executives who want to learn about housing industry news. And then if you're giving them enough value, and they're listening to you each week, then they'll get to know, like, and trust you. And then if you give them an avenue to do so, they could potentially get in touch. It's like, oh, you do recruiting in this industry, then let's get in touch because we're hiring a new team at the moment. So that's kind of the obvious way that as you grow a podcast, you attract listeners, and you would make sure that you're targeting the ideal listeners who are also ideal clients for your business. But it takes a long time because, as you know, with any medium or any social media platform, but especially podcasting, because we're still in quite early days in terms of discoverability with podcasts. It takes a long time, unless you spend loads of money on advertising, to grow a podcast and grow a listener base. But the other side of things is the guest side. So before you've even had a single listener, you could prospect for your business by leveraging guest relationships. So if, just taking this housing recruiter as an example, if they just reach out to these C-suite executives who may be hiring in the future and say, would you like to be a guest on our podcast? Then before you've even got a single listener, potentially on your first episode, you've just got in the room with a key decision maker, potentially an hour-long conversation where, there's a bit of small talk, but then you're getting into the kind of deep side of things. You're showing your expertise. You're giving them value by putting their content in front of your audience. And now you've just created now you've just created a relationship that you may not have otherwise been able to make. Like, lots of people who own a business will know how difficult it is to send DMs or cold outreach on social media like LinkedIn, just to sort of say, oh, you look like you could be in the position to hire someone soon, or something like that. Or, I noticed you, or whatever. Just something that's obviously a sales pitch, where if it's like, hey, I noticed you were speaking at such and such event about such and such, would love to get you in front of our audience on our podcast to discuss and hear a bit of your expertise and get that in front of our audience. They're far more likely to say yes to that than an obvious sales pitch, and then you've got them in a room with you. So that's the key thing that we're focusing on at the moment with clients who are looking to grow a business with their podcast, so that we can start getting them value and getting them a return on investment early on before they've started building up a listener base of hundreds.
Wonderful. That's absolutely wonderful. Now, I have to ask you, what separates podcasts that thrive from those that just quietly disappear, the pod feed? Because they don't all last. We are, as we're recording this, I have episode 18 going out tomorrow. But a few weeks ago, we had episode 10, and I was bringing up the stats of hundreds of thousands of podcasts that don't make it to episode 10. So what separates the podcasts that thrive?
Yeah. I mean, there's something like 4 million or so podcasts, but out of the ones that are active, I don't know the numbers, but it's around 500,000. It's like nowhere near in terms of all the ones that you just mentioned, like they just give up before the 10th episode. I would say, again, let's split this into 3 because it's nice and easy to remember. So the first thing that I would say that podcasters or business owners need to be clear on if they're going to build a podcast that lasts is clarity of purpose. So again, understanding exactly who your ideal listener is, who you're looking to get your podcast in front of, but also getting a really clear understanding of what you want to get out of your podcast. And some of the wins you can get from podcasting as a business owner are quite difficult to measure. So in terms of raising your profile and getting your face out there and things like that, they're not impossible to measure for sure, but they're more difficult to measure. But if you can think of a couple of outcomes that you want to get out of your podcast, really specific. So whether that's by month 12, we want to have landed a client or, gotten 10 leads through the podcast that we can directly link back to the podcast. Or, after 24 months, we want to be attracting a lead a month, or whatever that is.
Yes.
So, and if you give yourself these reasonable expectations, which goes on to the second point I was going to make about having realistic expectations, then not expecting to get these results straight away is going to help you to kind of stay motivated going forward. When we start working with people on their podcast, we have a conversation about this, and we say, like, ideally you need at least 1 to 2 years outlook on podcasting. If they come to us and say, within 3 months, I want to be beating this guy, or I want to be, getting a return on investment straight away so I can pay for the editing. Like, it just doesn't really work like that unless your podcast is exceptional and you spend loads of money on advertising it, or you're a celebrity who already has a massive audience.
Yeah.
So realistic expectations in terms of the time frame, and also realistic expectations in terms of the effort that it takes, as we were talking about, to put a consistent podcast out there.
Right.
Which leads me on to the third point, which is systems and support. So you can get support just from information online, YouTube videos, podcasts, blogs, and things like that. Ideally, you want to speak to someone who's done it before and who's been doing it for a few years, either a podcaster, or if you have budget behind you, then somebody who can actually help you put it together.
Right.
Because a lot of people come to us and they're surprised by how much work it takes to actually just get the podcast launched in the first place. They're expecting maybe 2 to 4 weeks. We want to get it out straight away. But when we say to them, we need to do some strategy first. We need to look into the, who the ideal listener is, what other competition is, what the competition is out there. Then we need to put together a full brand, like your cover art, your logo, things like that, your intro and outro, trailer. We need to do copywriting. We need to come up with a name that's unique. And all these things before we even think about recording and planning the first episodes.
Sure.
So if you can speak to someone who's done it before, especially, if you find someone who helps other people do it as well. And this isn't a plug or anything. I'm just, there are plenty of people who will give you advice for free as well. I mean, I've got some videos on the YouTube channel where there's like a 5-step process of how to launch a podcast, goes through the whole thing, give you a good idea of like what exactly it does entail, and then what you need to do week to week to keep it going. So I think that as well, when they realize, oh my God, we've actually got to do all this stuff, we got to find guests. And that's another thing. Like, it doesn't have to be an interview podcast.
No.
A lot of people, if we're going down the guest prospecting route and you do want to get guests on as a business strategy, then fine. But a lot of the time you can pad it out, not in like, padding out with rubbish, but fill in the gaps between those guests with solo episodes, just so your listeners are still getting value. And that's something that I think a lot of people are a little bit afraid of, but then maybe think about, maybe think about also getting a co-host involved, just so you do have a bit of support in terms of actually putting episodes together. If one person just can't make it one week, then you've got someone else to lean on. So yeah, those are the 3 things: clarity of purpose, realistic expectations, and then having support in place.
Yeah, that last one especially resonates. You don't have to feel pressured to always have an interview. You can always, talk about some timely topics that for whatever time that you're putting this podcast out. And so if you didn't have an interview that week or they canceled, it's okay. And it's good to have a few episodes in the can, as we would say, just in case, right? You might, something might come up in your personal life, or you're traveling or something. So always have a few backup episodes is always a good tip as well.
Yes, batch recording, definitely.
So Joe, I really appreciate you taking the time for us today. Your website is claricast.com. That's CLARIC. Claricast. And you can also find Joe on social media. There at Pod. And we really appreciate you coming on the show today. And we hope to have you again in the future.
Yeah, for sure. I really appreciate the time. It really always really interesting to go through some of these questions and, speak about things that maybe some business owners hopefully haven't thought of yet, to give them a bit of extra insight. But yeah, if you're on your podcast app already and you want to learn more about starting and running a podcast that actually gets you business results, then just search Podcasting Amplified on any of your favorite podcast listening platform.
Yes, I urge everyone to subscribe, Podcasting Amplified, and also go to claricast.com. Joe, thank you for being on the show, and all the best in the future.
Thanks, Paul.
All right, well, the Link Through Social podcast will be back right after this short message.
Tired of stressing over what to post on social media? Meet Smart Post App, your all-in-one solution to create, schedule, and grow your content effortlessly. In just a few taps, you can generate engaging posts, stay consistent, and keep your audience coming back for more. No more guessing, no more burnout, just smarter content, faster. Whether you're a business owner, creator, or entrepreneur, Smart Post offers both premium and pro plans. In addition, we have new features that have been recently added that include instantly viewing public links to your posts on any network, weekly view allowing you to plan hour by hour, account groups group your accounts to save time and simplify your workflow, and a desktop version which offers a simpler way to stay consistent. Start posting smarter today at smartpostapp.com. Smart Post App, because your content should work for you.